Hello, hello. Hello, David here with Collapse Club, where we talk about how we are to live in the time of collapse. Today, I am with Andrew Constantino, my friend, who organizes tiny house villages for homeless people. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, David.
So just to get started, here's a question. What do homeless people know about collapse that other people don't know?
Well, I think that, as we've seen with the proliferation of tents and encampments, and it seems like the crisis called homelessness grows, that they have no protection from the knowledge that everything is collapsing. That they are directly exposed to what is occurring in the most visceral, real way imaginable. So there's very few escapes when you're out on the street.
And what do you do in your work to ameliorate those effects?
Well, the tiny house villages, I'm definitely a true believer in them because it's inviting people in to have a place and a sense of community and safety. And so it's kind of a refuge for folks, and it can definitely lead to greater things for them. But at the baseline, it just is offering that refuge.
You spent some time yourself being homeless, I think.
Yes.
What are the lessons that you bring from that experience to the work you're doing now?
Um, I would say is that whatever we believe that the problems with society are, it is far more grim and dark than I think we're really willing to acknowledge. I
Grim?
mean,
Yeah, grim dark. Yeah, I've heard grim dark used as a style indicator for a certain kind of TV show. There's a style. Um, we'll talk more about that. What sort of framework of understanding do you use to approach these questions?
I mean, like one way I would describe it is, like in the past, it seems like, well, my parents got divorced when I was 13 and it was kind of messy. And that is considered like family crisis or, like traumatic events that might lead me to go see a very expensive therapist later in life.
Mhm.
Whereas I think the reality today is you don't see people that have come from difficult family situations. It's shattered families, into just a million pieces and then gasoline on it and it lit on fire, so it's not someone who um, fell into addiction maybe as a teen or in their 20s. It's someone who is coming from generational addiction and trauma. And so I just think that it makes it so things are much more complex. There are no easy answers left. And any interventions that we could have done as a society to prevent where we are now, that ship has sailed. And in many ways, we can only cope with where we're at.
What is left for us to do?
I definitely think that, I always sound like, such a nihilist or a doomsayer, but I do think that there are ways, for us to, I don't know, course correct or try to basically rebuild value in our society or in this world. I just think that things are so distorted now. It's like we're surrounded in a mist and it's hard to know the path forward. And so all we can do is to step by step, constantly reassess what we're doing until we find the path again.
You think it's a matter simply of uncertainty that we just don't know what's going to happen? Or do you think there's some more fundamental perversion of our systems of meaning?
Well, I definitely think that that's it. And so, I mean, I think that, we then enter into like the Venn diagram of where people who are maybe a little more authoritarian, disciplinarian, conservative, and people who are more liberal or, like egalitarian actually overlap. Because really, it seems like what is missing is a sense of values has been hollowed out of our society. And that has made it so our compass just spins out of control because there's no North Star.
Where would you look for value in these days?
Well, I think you could, look at it large scale and say, can we all agree that the planet should have value? And like maybe the continuation of the possibility of life on the planet, that seems pretty important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
But also like with everything we just been through over the past 2 years, it's like, it's definitely, I think has the potential for a wake up call, of, all people are important, that, we are interconnected, and what affects one of us eventually will affect all of us. And so I just think that to make enemies of one another, or to marginalize, or to just, push out other people and say, well, I have what I need, it doesn't matter what you have. I think that it's not only immoral, but it will affect us if we allow people to live in squalor and poverty and trauma and injustice. It is actually fueling the fire that will reach us one day.
Yeah, it's coming for us. I think so too.
It is.
I know from my personal experience, there can be enormous rewards in helping individuals. I served food at a tiny house village that was for difficult to serve people, drug addicts and people with severe mental illness. At the beginning, there was this one fellow who was going through the garbage cans and ranting to himself. And that's basically all he did, and carry stuff back to hoard in front of his tiny house. But I served breakfast there for a number of months and interacted with him a little bit, as much as possible, took a bowl of oatmeal to him now and again. At the end of my sojourn there, about 6 months, he came up to me and he shook my hand and he thanked me in the most polite, gentle, coherent way. It was a miracle as far as I was concerned. I could hardly believe it. And the sense of warmth and gratitude and accomplishment, not my accomplishment, but that progress had been made, that this human being had been reached in the depths of fiery despair, was really important. It was important to do that on a human level.
Well, and I hear what you're saying. That I feel, that's why I feel fortunate that I get to have a lot of those experiences, and they're amazing. It almost feels selfish, and I think that speaks to it's like facing reality. It can offer us the opportunity for the most fulfilling experiences that we desperately crave, but that we also seem to hide from. And that is the contradiction of our time, right? That living up to facing, what is happening in our world and with other people in our communities, it would actually give us more than, the feed on my phone or Netflix could ever provide. And yet I still avoid it.
Well, it's challenging. It's chaotic. It's it's dirty sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're right.
People are upset. They're angry. It takes a particular mindset or a particular abandon to throw oneself into that world.
Yeah, I think that like it's also about control. I think that, like you're saying, it can be dirty. I just think that life can have experiences like if you and I hiked up a mountain, we might be covered in sweat or dirt. And it's like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to exert myself in ways that I don't directly financially or in some other tangible material form benefit from? And so it's kind of like that kind of thinking has just really taken hold. But us hiking up the mountain, is it about an experience that we're having as individuals and together and with that mountain? And those experiences are what life is, you know, and to deny yourself that, to cut yourself off from that, you are really, you know, you're your own jailer in your own prison.
The title of today's episode is from you, The Desert, the Desert of the Real. What does that mean to you?
So it's a quote, I'm going to mispronounce his name, of Baudrillard, you know, a philosopher. And basically, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, that, you know, I love making dramatic statements with lots of flair and, you know, dark overtones. But I think that there is the lie. And I think that that's what I really think we're getting at, you know, being our own jailer. And so an example I would give of the desert of the real, so that it makes more sense, is if we look at this new thing, metaverse, right? We're going to have like this pseudo virtual reality, augmented reality playground for us to all be in. I
Mhm.
would say another example of that, that escape into the mind where we can create this new reality, is kind of like a Disneyland. It is a mental Disneyland.
Mhm.
And if we think about Disneyland, like let's say you and I take a trip to Disneyland, and you know the children are playing, Mickey Mouse is there, and everyone is so friendly and welcoming at Disneyland, right? You know, like Cinderella comes and wants to take a photo with you. There's roller coasters, we have fun, but is that real, right? Is Disneyland real? Not only is it not real, you know, people are being paid to behave this way towards you.
Yeah.
It also is trying to extract money out of you,
Yeah.
right? So we already know that, but we kind of let that go. But I think the desert of the real is about what actually lies behind Disneyland. So, and what I mean by that is the girl who portrays Cinderella, who does the photo op with you,
Yeah.
sleeps in her car. Mickey
Um,
Mouse can't feed his children. That the people that are operating the roller coaster, they're buried in medical debt. That is the desert of the real. What lies behind this fantasy that we create for ourselves is not only not the fantasy, we can accept the fact that Cinderella is a real person, but what we refuse to accept is that she is living in desperation and despair and is playing make believe just to survive.
wow.
And I'm saying that the desert is behind every facade that we create,
Right.
and it is frightening.
So it's not just people who are explicitly playing characters for our entertainment, but it is throughout our society, all of the roles that we play in the business as usual, modern industrial culture, uh, all of that is a fantasy or a lie, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that the friendliness of your waitress at Applebee's hides a despair and the collapse that is just moments away. And that we all play this part and don't acknowledge what is happening with one another, what is happening with the unraveling of our communities. And it's we all play a part in upholding the lie, right?
Okay. So you're saying that I play a part in upholding the lie, right? What am
Well,
I? I mean, I'm not offended. I'm just trying to bring it to myself. It's like, what am I doing to do that? And is there an imperative to do something else?
Um, I mean, what can we do to shatter the lie? I think that not participating in it is part of it, but it doesn't mean that I don't have lunch at Applebee's. It just means that I need to spare a thought, for all the people that I interact with, and they are human beings, and acknowledging one another's humanity and the struggle that we're all enduring. And when you start to just feel that and know that, and really, you know, consider it, the way that you're treating people is going to change. Like the phenomena on the internet of Karens. In many ways, that archetype is really someone who is so heavily part of the lie that we're mocking how much they believe in it, because the rest of us only slightly uphold it. And but these are like the real believers in the lie of fairness, of justice, of like meritocracy. So I think that it really, the step is to understand it, like when I'm buying groceries, to consider, where does the checkout clerk who's so friendly, where do they live? What is their life like? And just considering these things, I think begins to just open us, to realizing how deep the problem is. And then we begin to face it, like you're describing, interacting with someone with the burritos. When we begin to face it, then now we can have the experience of reaching someone or understanding them, or they feel seen and understood for who they really are.
What I hear you saying is it's about compassion, and compassion starts with awareness. And the idea is to be aware of the humanity of everyone that we meet, the humanity of the person that we meet, regardless of the role that they may be playing.
Mhm.
Even if that role is in fact extremely consequential, like a doctor or a
Oh yeah.
plumber or a car mechanic, someone who creates utility and ability in our lives. Nevertheless, they're a human being with their own story. And if we reduce them to their role, if we reduce them to their value to us, then that's cruel, and it's going to land us in trouble because it's just the wrong way to relate to people.
Well, I think that eventually it results in our own dehumanization as well. And I mean, I'd even throw in another example that is, I mean, we should pick unsympathetic examples too. Like, let's say the cartoonish villain of QAnon Shaman. What has the internet poison done to someone's mind? What has media portrayals and depictions, distorted someone's beliefs, and that this is a human being, that the modern miasma has just completely clouded their vision. And so we have to be willing to extend that to people that we don't agree with as well.
I agree, and I have a question about that. There are people who have adopted ways of being and ways of acting which are harmful to others. QAnon Shaman is sort of a grandiose example, but Trump himself and his crew, they exercise power in the world, which results in misery and death for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. So how are we to cope with people like that? What attitude are we to adopt to them?
Well,
Uh,
it definitely isn't like excusing their behaviors, their beliefs, and the real world consequences that that has on others. I mean, if there is any North Star, that North Star, should definitely be that we're seeking not to do harm to other living things, right? And I think that that's just so obvious that even they, on face value, would say they agree with it. Um, but I do think that it's there are people that have been so poisoned that they almost embody the poison. But I really believe that they are not the poison. That in some ways blaming other people, it's not addressing, like the real social problem that's happening. Like how are people just living in poverty and like red states and without opportunity, without education, and that's how they're susceptible to these beliefs, right? And so shutting it out and saying, well, it's almost doing what they're doing in some ways, but on a more solid moral high ground. It's saying that there is a segment of the population that is irredeemable and they must be destroyed. And so they may do it with people that are of a different color or a different religion or different political views. But we can't do that too. We can't say it's them, you know. I think that just furthers it, right? It's an escalation, and that it only creates the scenario for mutual assured self-destruction.
it's a doctrine of complete love, awareness, compassion, and love. I like
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Well, to come down a little in our remaining minutes, uh, what's on tap for you in terms of your work? What are you working on now?
Well, I mean, like I've been extremely busy, and it's mainly, there's more of the tiny house villages. I spend a lot of time like training our staff people that work at the villages, and focusing on honestly healing, helping, and just giving some kind of guidance and support to people that are desperately in need of it. And I'm happy to do that. It's a privilege to do it. I mean that sincerely. And I feel lucky that I spend my days um, often talking to people who are never talked to, who just feel like no one cares what happens to them. And being able to just in a small way being part of their life, it like I have a endless amount of joy at being able to do that.
Do you find that people respond on a sort of systemic level? Do you feel a change?
I would say no.
Hmm.
That sounds
That,
kind of negative,
well, that's too bad. Yeah.
but I mean I just think that it's like we were talking about earlier, that I think that a lot of the endemic problems that our society faces are very obvious, and that we are just unwilling to scale and seriousness and commitment face these problems. And there's many of them. There's a list, and they are just allowed to be hollowed out and to rot and to collapse. And so I mean I do feel like it's almost like the work that I do is to mitigate suffering. It's triage, but we need the surgeons to actually begin to do something. That you can't just have, we can't have EMTs dealing with society's problems.
So you're on the front lines, but we need the infrastructure to get into action to really make fundamental changes.
I mean, it needs to get serious, man. And it's like, this is not easy, but we can't, everything can't just be talk. It can't just be face value. You know, like, I mean, here we are, it's 2022 now. And I mean, one thing I've said is that, like, the single greatest intervention we could have ever made to prevent a lot of the problems socially that we see now is universal health care. So is that just not going to happen? Are we just going to wait till 2050? Are we going to wait until this whole world burns before we actually take dramatic steps forward?
Well, that's the question. Andrew, I want to thank you for joining me. I love talking to you. This has been great. I hope you'll come back. We've obviously
Yes.
we've just scratched the surface. So thank you, Wendy and others who joined us on the chat. This is Collapse Club, and until we meet again, farewell.
Bye.